Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, the big debate goes on. Should we keep the Turnpike? Should we sell the Pennsylvania Turnpike? Should we lease the Pennsylvania Turnpike? We're going to hear from a point of view on that subject. And then April is Financial Education Month. We're going to deal with that subject after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program, and thanks for watching. Well, we've had a whole variety of points, a whole bunch of points of view, a variety of viewpoints on Pennsylvania Newsmakers dealing with this whole question about what to do with the Turnpike. The governor, when he made his big budget message in February to the legislature, said, well, maybe we ought to lease it. So now we have leasing it, selling it, keeping the way it is, reforming it. I mean, we've got a whole bunch of ideas, and true to our philosophy on this program, we're airing a whole bunch of points of view. Last week we had on a gentleman from the Keystone Center, Research Center, who thinks that it ought not be done, that it ought to be maintained the way it is. Joining me now is Matt Brouillette. He's the president of the Commonwealth Foundation, was on the program a couple weeks ago. I'll tell you what, Matthew, there's more ideas about, but in some ways that's a good idea. At least for once we're having a big statewide, do you agree? We're having a big statewide debate.
Absolutely. And it's one that we have to have, simply because we have a commission report from last fall that said we have $1.7 billion shortfall, annual shortfall, to pay for our highways, roads, bridges, and mass transit.
That's correct.
The question is, how do we pay for it?
How do we do it? And then the governor came up with this, you know, and then there's sort of this veiled notion that, well, maybe we'll have some taxes if we don't. Yeah. You know, the T word comes up, and I guess the oil profits, gross oil profits revenue on the table. But let's get your thoughts about this. So let's go through these. Should we keep the Turnpike situation the way it is?
We should not keep it the way it is. It ought to remain an asset of the state, however. Okay. So the sale of the Turnpike, we think, should be off the table.
Okay. No sale.
No sale, but we ought to look at leasing it, whether that is for 30 years, 50 years, or 99 years, as some states have gone. That ought to be on the table, because the only alternative to pay for that funding shortfall are higher taxes, higher fees. I mean, when you talk about taxes, you're talking higher gas taxes have been proposed, 12.5 cents, realty taxes, income taxes, sales taxes. It would take quite a few taxes to pay for our transportation needs.
So we've got don't keep it the way it is, lease it, but what about the sale angle?
Well, the sale, because we believe that this is, you know, effectively it's an asset. It is a monopoly. You don't have another stretch of road going like this that the state is on. And the people of Pennsylvania have invested in this. And we're saying, let's unlock that investment and use it to pay for our future transportation needs without having to raise taxes and fees and so forth.
You obviously spent a lot of time thinking about this. You recently testified before the Senate Transportation Committee. I want to pursue just one other. I want to try to get the range of thoughts out there for our viewers so they have an idea about what the possibilities are. Now, some people say, well, maybe what we ought to do is just bring about some internal reform. We could do some new things on the Turnpike, keep the commission, and then maybe look up a little north to that big road that connects New York and ultimately New York and Ohio, Route 80. Maybe we ought to toll that.
Well, that's certainly in the Turnpike's proposal, that they would have erect tolls along the I-80, as well as additional future potential for tolling other roads. In addition, there would be bonding that would be paid for through higher taxes. The Turnpike Commission has already announced that they will increase tolls by 25% in 3 years, 2010. And then 3% every year thereafter. That's going to happen one way or another.
Regardless but at the moment, the revenues from that would be put back into the Turnpike, right? They would not be put into the roads and bridge repairs, or would they?
No, right.
That's what I thought.
Yes, their proposal is that they would then bond for lots of money, and then they would utilize increased tolls plus new tolls placed on currently free roads to pay off those bonds.
All right, let me talk. I mean, I'm using you as, you spent a lot of time researching this, so I'm using you as sort of an expert on this, and I'm glad to have you here. I want to ask you another question about this. and maybe this is a crazy idea. One of the things I thought was, why don't we do more use of the Turnpike for economic development, for tourism? I mean, I don't know if it'd ever be a destination place, and I'm not, we can debate the efficacy of casinos, for example, right. And I know that you're not exactly crazy about those. We've had some folks on, who like them, some who don't. But, why not use that long stretch of Turnpike for additional purposes, particularly when the Turnpike is located near a lot of urban areas where people get on and off and go do things there? Is that a stupid idea?
No. So you're saying Roy Rogers are not destination points for most of the travelers on the Turnpike?
No. I say, can't we do something about getting the rest stops clean?
Sure, yeah.
I just want them clean.
I think most people would appreciate that.
Yeah, but go ahead.
I think that what you do by bringing the private sector in, I mean, first of all, when other tollways, particularly like Indiana Toll Road or the Chicago Skyway, when the public sector was looking at these as assets, what could we get for the value that's locked into these? They were well undervalued what the private sector brought to the table. 80 to 90% more money was brought to the table by the private sector. That could be the same thing for Pennsylvania.
Okay, we're going to take a break. I'm talking with Matt Brouillette, who studied this, and we're getting out the full range of options for you, which is what we want to do. We'll be back after these words with our continued discussion.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the Pennsylvania Newsmakers. I'm chatting with Matt Brouillette. We're talking about the range of options that are available for the governor's idea about leasing the Turnpike. The one thing we can say, it certainly stirred a lot of debate. I mean, I can't remember a sort of a policy question that has gotten this kind of debate, other than taxes, when there's some big tax hike going on. But this has a lot of fascinating wrinkles. I mean, we were talking at the break. Why can't people put, manufacturing operations there and other kinds of industrial capacity? I mean, even if we have to build new ways to get on and off the Turnpike, after all, I mean, they talk about having convenience to get from place to place. That people are always concerned about access routes. How do you get to a market? Is that crazy?
No, absolutely not. And in fact, I would say that by bringing the private sector in as a partner with the public sector, you would see those kinds of innovations that the private sector says, hey, we see a need, they will go out and fill that. And I think that you would probably see that along the Turnpike as a result of a lease.
Now, when you testified, and I have your testimony, you said something in your testimony I thought was pretty, I don't know if it's unusual given, your sort of strong stance on the private sector and the market. You say it's important to note that the private sector retains full control of its transportation, infrastructure, and services.
The public sector.
I'm sorry, that the public sector retains full control.
Yes, we see that is a function of government, that it ought to see this, but we see it also as a key economic development tool. But it's not one that necessarily the public sector must provide. That while it can have oversight and planning, and the operational could be done with the private sector.
But control, under leasing or whatever arrangements. But
in fact, by the public sector, it says we have a contract. Here are the standards that you must abide by, the performance that must be delivered on these operational. And to give an example, Terry, I think that if a private sector company had a contract on I-78 during the Valentine's Day storm, there would have been financial penalties for their failure to perform. We don't have that, of course, with the public sector.
That's true. One of the other, there was a bill just introduced, I think just this week or last week by Senator Ori that deals with the Turnpike Commission itself. I think everybody knows the Turnpike Commission, gubernatorial appointees. I don't think, they're all gubernatorial appointees subject to...
Senate, yes.
Subject to confirmation. And they pretty much run as an independent entity of state government. And she thinks it ought to be folded into the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. Is that a good idea or a bad idea, or don't you have a position
No,
on that?
we do. In fact, it's interesting that you have the Turnpike Commissioner, or the Turnpike Executive Director, earns $180,000 to manage a 500-mile road, and our Secretary of Education, who manages 40,000 miles of roads, earns $50,000 less.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's an interesting dynamic of why do we have this separate entity that we have long known has been a patronage, a playground for, well, in particular, Vince Fumo and Bob Jubileer, and even in Vince Fumo's 139 indictment, there are a lot of references to the Turnpike.
But one of the things, just on the other side for a moment, one of the things you hear that when truckers, you know, I've caught some talk shows when this subject was on, truckers driving through would pick up the phone, call the talk shows, say that they think it's pretty well run, that the road's in pretty good condition, in defense, you know, in defense of what they've done. And then I noticed that when they had the big snowstorm that blocked I-78 and had a little problem in northern Lancaster County, you know, where there was a fire with one of those big rigs, the Turnpike folks actually got that cleaned up pretty quickly. So I don't know, I mean, how efficient, they seem at any rate to be efficient, no?
Well, absolutely, and I don't think that is the issue here. And in fact, the privately run roads that were also hit by that same storm in other states were open and operational. And in fact, with a contract in place between the public and private sector, you can have performance measurements and levels of operation that exceed what the state must meet today. And so I think that you can ensure that you're going to have the same quality, if not better, as a result of these approaches.
All right, before you go, the bottom line here is in this partnership. Let's just call it the public-private partnership. Now, what do you think, what are the parameters, if you were doing it, that the state should insist be involved in any private? I mean, just generally speaking, what are the ground rules?
Well, certainly you ought to lay out what tolling schedule you would permit. Right now we know that the Turnpike plans to raise them by 25% in 2010 and 3% thereafter. That might be a standard by which you would enter in that contract.
But you would want that in the contract?
Oh, absolutely.
So to protect the public.
That's right.
Go ahead.
That's right. And that in that process that you lay out, how long until they have to fill a pothole? How long do they have to clear roadkill off of the... These things run hundreds upon hundreds of pages of outlining what exactly the private sector is responsible for in order to protect the public. This needs to be a win for both the public and for the private.
And you think that, to conclude with where I started, that the Turnpike, as an in addition to its important transportation, as a transportation avenue, I mean, everybody understands how critical it is, that it's also an economic development asset, resource, if you will, that we have not used properly. Or not properly, but we haven't taken full advantage of.
Correct. I mean, we have an asset there that we've invested in for more than 6 decades. And so we have an opportunity that we can raise all of these taxes and fees, or we can lease it and bring a lot of private sector money into our public infrastructure needs. So we think that that is an option that we ought to pursue before higher taxes and higher fees and more borrowing.
All right, thanks for the update. Well, April is Financial Education Month. We're going to hear from our friends from the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Governor Rendell has made that announcement. April is always the month. We do a little update on financial literacy, a part of the programming that I think is very important. We will do that when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money, and by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education, 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, April is Financial Education Month. Joining me, as often is the case, is Mike Wishnow. He's the Senior Vice President from the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, and Hillary Hunt, who's Director of the Pennsylvania Office of Financial Education. Did I get that right?
You did?
And has a great name. We talked about this last year. She ought to be an actress. I keep saying that. Hillary, great to have you.
Thank you for having me back.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the governor. Take it from the start. Governor makes this announcement. You all in your office have initiatives.
We do.
What are they?
We do. Well, April is Financial Education Month in Pennsylvania, and we're encouraging all Pennsylvanians to get involved in some type of financial education activity, whether it be an organized event or seeking out financial education information on their own. They might do that by visiting our website. It's moneysbestfriend.com. We have a wealth of information and resources and ways that people can get more information about financial education programs there.
Now, in addition to that, you get involved with teacher training programs, and do you go out and talk to community organizations? Is that one of the things you do?
We do. We work with community-based organizations, everything from Girl Scout organizations to faith-based groups, you name it, the entire gamut.
I'm going to create some work for Hillary here. Now, in other words, organizations can call your office, and you or some folks on your staff will go out and do a program.
What we do is we help to train the trainer. So what we want to do is we want to make those folks able to, in some cases, teach the personal finance content themselves.
Excellent.
Or hook up with somebody else who is a financial service professional who can provide some of that information.
Now, you're going to also have a statewide program coming up?
We do. In June, we'll have a program for community-based organizations and folks that are interested in providing financial education in community settings. And in July, we'll be doing a program for teachers where we'll bring them in a college campus for a week and give them lots of tools and resources to teach kids about money.
All right, Michael. Now, in addition, the credit union, now you folks are doing stuff all the time. You know, we've been talking about this financial literacy, providing updates and, you know, periodically. But you also, do you have some special initiatives that you announce this month, or is it or you just re-emphasize what you do all the time?
No, well, certainly our credit unions are involved in financial education literally
all the time.
But April is a special month. It's tax month. There are a lot of other financial implications of April. Right. So it's a good teaching moment. And most of our credit unions are doing something for Financial Education Month. It also is National Youth Financial Education Month. So actually the week of April 23 through 27, credit unions are focusing on youth. They're focusing on their youth account programs. They're focusing on teaching kids about money, and so there's a lot of activity in the credit unions regarding financial education.
All right, this is going to sound a little stupid, which I can often be. Why do we keep having to reiterate why this is so important? I mean, it makes so much sense with all the debt that you know, particularly young people can get into, and this thing with the credit cards when they go into school every year. You go into their student centers, and there's 10 credit card companies. And I'm not against credit. And they give these cards willy-nilly. So we all agree we need to do more about teaching financial education in the schools. Let's talk a little bit about that, Hillary.
Well, it's vital to start kids on the right path. Actually, studies have been done that show that kids form their financial behaviors and what they're going to be, a saver or a spender, by the time they're 10 years old. So we've got to start.
Sounds like so much in life, doesn't it?
It does. But anybody who's you know, met a middle schooler knows that, you know, by then they've already started to establish some of these habits. So we need to start with the youngest of kids and then progressively add more education through their senior year of high school that's age appropriate, obviously.
Mike, when we talk about these, I mean, admittedly, there's a role for the school, but as we've talked about over these years, isn't there a significant role for the parents too? I mean, you know, schools can only do so much. What should?
Absolutely, and you know, we have our nonprofit foundation that does a lot of work in financial education, and frankly, the way we do it is through partnerships, and those partnerships have to occur with parental support, with support from the families, with support from the schools. But the schools are being asked to teach so much stuff, right, Hillary? You know, really, it's not another course they need to teach. Rather, they need to partner with perhaps a credit union, another financial institution, to come in and help them to put what they're already teaching into financial education concept. Into, you know.
Okay, April is Financial Education Month, announced by Governor Rendell. When we come back, we're going to continue our discussion about ways to help kids not get into trouble, and maybe the rest of us as well. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Builders Association, building today for a better tomorrow. And by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Welcome back to the program. It's, what is it? A Financial Education Month. I got that out. We were having a discussion here about a whole bunch of things. All right, Michael, let me ask you about this financial education for youth. Why is this something that's necessary for life?
Well, because habits are formed so early, as Hillary said. Our children in kindergarten are already starting to develop their habits. By the time they're 15, 16 years old, they're spending an incredible amount of money, and many of them haven't developed a savings habit, and that's just sort of, it's hard to unlearn bad habits.
And I'll tell you, Hillary, one of the things none of us want to do is get those bills from these credit card companies that have 18%, and then if you miss a payment by a day or so, you end up, whatever happens to the interest rate. Let's talk about things about how, given what you do, how do we get more people involved? What is the process to sort of escalate the activity levels, maybe just for teachers, but for other people as well?
Well, the important thing is to recognize that everybody can get involved in some way, shape, or form in financial education initiatives, whether it's by availing themselves of a class so that they can better themselves, teaching young people in their lives, whether it be children or grandchildren, nieces or nephews. I know folks that don't have any children, but they give piggy banks as Christmas presents or those kinds of things.
Savings bonds.
That's right.
Are they all right? Are they all right?
Absolutely.
I do
Savings bonds are wonderful.
Bonds. Yeah, go ahead.
But to help those in your life to start those conversations, one of the biggest challenges is that people just don't want to talk about money. It's a taboo topic in so many families.
That's true. That's something we've not talked about how you don't want to do that. And I guess we're running out of time here, but I guess it all boils down to this is still something where there's a lot of family responsibility, where people ought to be sitting down and talking about, how to maintain checking accounts, credit cards, how to do it properly. Am I right about this, Mike?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. My son is 15 years old, 9th grader, and got financial education for the first time. Oh. And guess what? He didn't have to take the class.
But guess what? We know who would have told him and advised him about how to do it. Thanks for watching this edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and stay well. See you next time.